Our first panel is called Television in the Post-Strike World. It will last half an hour or 66 minutes without commercials. A little longer for Sue, she's at HBO. And if there's time at the end, we'll open it up to questions for the audience. So we have an absolutely remarkable panel. And maybe we can go down and everyone introduce yourself and say a little about what you're doing.
I'm Shawn Ryan. What I'm doing post-strike is I finished up post on The Shield last month, and that will be on the air in September, our final season. And just found out this past week that The Unit, the other show I do on CBS, is back for next season. So jumping forward into that, and then just doing a lot of development stuff right now. I've got a thing with a few development things that I'm looking at right now, and just trying to get more shows on the air and doing a little movie work. That's what I've been up to.
Is that all? I currently work on the show 24 on Fox, and we're about halfway done writing the season, which premieres in January. And I have one little tiny lone sad pilot in development at HBO with Sue now. And that's it for me.
Hi, I'm Josh Berry. I work at ABC. I put together their one-hour shows, developed shows like Desperate Housewives and Grey's Anatomy and Pushing Daisies and all the one-hour shows. And right now we're in the phase. We're just about to start shooting our pilots that will go on the air in about 9 months.
I'm Sue Naegle. I work at HBO, but it's only my third week, so I don't be gentle with me. We're in the middle of shooting a biker drama called 1% with Alan Taylor and Michael Tolkien, and we're casting a few pilots. Suburban Shootout with Barry Sonnenfeld and Michelle Ashford, and we're in the middle of casting Joni Marchenko's pilot as well, and in pre-production on a few other ones and starting to budget some things, as well as working in series on Alan Ball's new show, True Blood, which is going to premiere in September. And we're very excited about Brannon's pilot. He just has to turn in.
Chris?
I'm Chris Brancato. Post-strike, I have thankfully, still a deal at ABC Studios where we develop one-hour dramas primarily for ABC Network. We're about to go and shoot a pilot called Prince of Motor City in Detroit, Michigan.
It's really good.
Good pilot, and it's written by Jessica Goldberg, and starring so far Andy McDowell and Piper Perabo and several people to be named later. And also beginning a new cycle of television development, both writing myself and also overseeing other writers for one-hour drama.
Oh, great. Right, well, my first question is about health care. I'm so used to that. No, okay, so this year the upfronts were done without fanfare. It's May and studios are open to pitches. Networks are buying international series with no American writers. The landscape has clearly shifted. Now, some of these changes were in motion before the strike, and some were accelerated by the strike. But the question that was on the forum for this was, will pilot season ever be the same again? With the corollary, what changes are advantageous? Because it's not like pilot season was so great before. So do you want to, Josh, since you're at the network, why don't you?
Yeah, I think it's going to take a while before pilot season is exactly the same, but I know at least at ABC we do want it to. We believe in pilots. I mean, we believe in the pilot process. I think what's changed is the actual dates. The actual season is going to start spreading out at all the networks. But at ABC, I do feel, and I know at CBS and the CW, there's this sort of, I feel like there's a natural gravitational pull to that cycle, and it's really hard to get out of it. I think the agents like it. I think most people, it creates a lot of jobs to have a bunch of shows going at the same time, and it spreads out the wealth amongst a lot of writers and directors and crew, and to have 100 some odd pilots going at the same times. But it is going to take a while before it comes back. There are a lot fewer pilots shooting this year. We're budgeted for fewer pilots to shoot next year. But I do think generally some version of pilot season is here to stay.
And HBO's always been on its own schedule and will continue to be.
Now that I'm in a different, I was an agent and now I'm in technically sort of competing with ABC in some ways. I think that we would love for pilot season to continue to stay the same because there's a natural kind of weeding out process and things kind of, everything's busy at one time, and then once it's over, HBO or Showtime or any of the other sort of cable outlets can go in and start casting in a way that feels a little bit more organic, and we have the luxury of taking our time and making pilots, and sometimes it's good and sometimes I think it can probably, when you're counting on excuse me, programming your network, we're making a pilot right now with David Milch. He's got one important piece of his cast in Ray Winstone who's not available until August, so you have really a 6-month casting process to find the sort of the younger cop to work alongside with him. It's sort of a two-hander. So it's good and bad. You really can have an exhaustive, great casting process, but you also are in it for 6 months. So, and everyone loves the project, loves the, loves the idea of having it on the air, but you're sitting there looking at 6 months of, God, are we going to be able to find this guy or not? And is there something to taking too much time with it?
Well, Chris, you're both shooting a pilot and pitching pilots now.
Yeah.
How-
Well, first of all, I think last year there were about 112 1-hour and half-hour dramas shot, and this year it's something along the lines of in the 60s. So the deleterious effect is that 50 writers who would have had pilots made and a shot at series now are out in the cold. At the same time, for this particular pilot season, one of the benefits, which I have not seen before at the network, is, for instance, we're making our pilot, rather than having to turn it in early May for ABC to make its decision May 15th, we're starting to shoot around July 1st, just in time for the SAG strike. But so we have had a whole bunch of extra weeks to prep the pilot to, because there are fewer pilots, we're not in the typical yearly mad race to get, usually it's all of us are looking for that 35-year-old handsome leading man at the same time, and only one show can get those 3 guys. 35-year-old handsome leading man who can really act. And so it's been nice. I almost feel like we're making the pilot to some degree almost on an HBO model, which is to say we're really taking our time with it, and we're able to prep the show without quite the same mad dash. We're also shooting in Detroit, which is interesting because there's no, at least up until now, there's no infrastructure to do a show there. So the extra time helps us build production infrastructure there that we're going to need to shoot the pilot. So yes, also going to pitch. I assume that in the next couple of years, things may return to some version of normalcy, which means that as the networks get competitive with each other again, we'll go back to, how many scripts did you guys buy? In a normal year, ABC would buy somewhere from 70 to 90 scripts.
That's what we bought when I first moved over to the network, and there was nothing working on the network. That's what we bought then. It's gone down every year just because we have fewer and fewer slots to fill each year as the network gets filled with all the shows. So last year, I think we ended up buying like 55. This coming year, around the same.
Yeah. Well, that again, if they're going to buy 55, then there are 55 writers or so, writer teams who are going to be able to sell there. I liked it better when they bought 90. But I think things will return to somewhat of the regular cycle. I know that, for instance, we're going to go in and sell stuff for fall 2009 to Josh and his cohorts, come July and August, like we usually do. But also, I think, the networks have been talking for years, Fox in particular, about doing this year-round programming and making shows at any time of the year. The strike hastened that, so that I think that, for instance, Swing Time is coming out on CBS as a summer series. Now, that may be because of its racy subject matter, but it's also their attempt to put new scripted drama on at an unusual time. So you're going to see more of that, and it'll be interesting to see whether this, like dinosaur of the network system, which has been in place for 40 or 50 years, is really going to change significantly, or whether it will go back. There are benefits to both the new way and the old way.
And how do you think it affects you creatively, Shawn, that the never-ending development?
It just sort of makes the competitiveness a 12-month-year job. 12-month-year job. I always find myself looking at what places are developing, and there are only so many ideas to go around, it seems like, and to try to find that one original thing that is going to really spark your interest and the network's interest is really difficult. And I'm working with a development person now since last year, and she's bringing writers to me and bringing ideas to me, and it's you're always every single day looking for that thing. I mean, you can potentially sell something next week every week. So it's exciting that way, but it's hard as well, and everything's getting to be a little bit more niche. I mean, I think that's where scripted TV is going. It's when I think about like the music I used to listen to in high school, the songs I listened to, every high school kid listened to, and now music has broken down into different forms, and do we even know what the number one song in the country is this week? I used to listen to Casey Kasem and I knew what it was, and I think the same's true for TV. The HBO is going to be providing things that feel of their brand and appeal to people, and FX is going to do its thing, and ABC is going to do its thing, and so the approach I've taken is really what's the best idea I have, and trying to quickly identify what's the best home for it.
Shawn, what's the number one song in the country?
I honestly don't know.
I'm sorry, I meant that for Brannon. I don't know. Touch My Body, Mariah Carey, I'm guessing? Yeah, that sounds good.
Nice. Now.
Now, how hip.
Well, I'm going to slightly shift the topics because and we'll start with Brannon. The explosion of cable channels continues. I believe HBO even won an Emmy this year. Congratulations. No. And more and more I hear network writers saying, screw it, I'm going to develop for cable. And the implication is that cable will treat them better, appreciate them, leave them alone. And syndication too. Is that true? Is that...
It's absolutely true.
No, it's not. No, it's not.
I don't know. I think everybody is very respectful in this business, and everyone wants to succeed. And whether you go to network or cable often depends on the concept you have, and might it be more appropriate. Really,
Aren't those lines blurring?
well, as Shawn
Yeah.
is saying, it's like there are many more places to sell. So you have maybe you'll tailor your project in one particular place, or it will feel like an ABC show. So you'll take it there. I mean, I think it's really project dependent.
And do you think, and I know you're on a network show now, but would Star Trek have worked on network?
That's a very good question. Who knows? If I had to answer it, I would say no, because it is a niche show. It's a very specific show with a specific fan base. It might have broken out to a larger base, but I don't know if it would have pulled in the kind of ratings that a network show needs.
But
to survive
now, what about Boomtown? Do you think that would have done better maybe on cable?
Well, a place like HBO or a Showtime might have known better how to handle something that didn't fit into a regular box. I know that when we were making Boomtown, Zucker's comment was always, can you make it more linear? And that was not the point of the show. And it went from a tiny bit of a critical darling at the beginning of the season with ratings, by the way, that now would keep it on network for years, but at the time were sort of mediocre ratings, and that was the challenge. I think that as writers, there's no doubt about the fact that cable offers, simply because of the wider latitude to explore dark characters, and also smaller ratings are okay. So that makes it clearly appealing to writers. The networks have a different mandate. They're trying to draw the largest amount of eyeballs possible, which, when I came out here to try to write for television, like my show that I wrote a pilot for that got on the air for Aaron Spelling, it had 17 million viewers and got canceled after 7 weeks. But there were only 3 networks. And now 17 million would keep you on forever. So I know that the terms of my employment with ABC Studios, they're not that interested on the business level having us go sell shows to the cable outlets, because we're there to try to create or be participants in something like along the lines of a Desperate Housewives, where you get enormous ratings. So as a writer, you sort of make a choice when you have your idea. You ask yourself whether it's a broad-based idea, whether it is more niche. As you start to look at the networks and look at the cable networks and look at their shows, and that'll tell you basically what they look for. For instance, AMC just starting to program, well, they're willing to do a period piece that had been submitted to HBO, and HBO rejected. So that wasn't right for them at HBO at the time, but it was right for AMC. Well, that was pre-sue, so that's, no fault of hers, obviously. The other thing is, I think that I notice now that, much like the feature film business, it's very important. You can't walk in anymore and say, well, it's about a crabby cop, and who's really does things, outside the box, and his by-the-book partner. Like that idea I could sell in 1990. I could just walk in and pretty much say that, and they'd say, oh, you're a good writer, go do that. Now you need to have an idea for a show, be it cable or network, that you can open like the first weekend of a movie. It needs to, in fact, ABC really started that ball rolling when Steve and Josh and that crew decided to put all their marketing push behind Desperate Housewives and Lost, and then ultimately Grey's Anatomy. They highlighted a couple of their shows, and frankly, the other shows didn't get as much marketing, and that was a correct strategy, which now I think the rest of the business has copied. On the cable side, it seems to me, because they make fewer shows, they take longer time to make their decisions. They put a lot of energy and marketing muscle into the 1 or 2 shows that they launch every year. So your chances of getting a show on cable seem to me to be less. Because how many do you guys develop?
It's probably on the drama side, I would say there's probably 40 scripts, but the development process can go on for 2 years or more, in some instances, depending on people's availability. So you make far fewer pilots, but your chances of getting it made, depending on what kind of pilot it is, extend beyond the traditional season.
Right.
By the way, Grey's Anatomy actually didn't have a huge marketing push.
No.
It was just piggybacked off of Desperate Housewives.
Yeah.
Josh, how often do you hear a pitch now and say, oh, I wish we could do that, but that's too cable?
Very, very infrequently.
Yeah,
Right.
I
yeah.
mean, it's I do feel like, our brand at ABC is, the only thing we won't do are things that are too dark, that are gritty to the point of sort of enervating lack of hope. That's, other than that, we still do try and be a broadcaster. We really do try, and we're fighting against, in some ways, this image of ABC as a new form of just programming for women. We really do see ourselves as broadcasters, and we do try to create shows that have the broadest reach. So
I think you also have to acknowledge that in the last 7-8 years, since the cable world has exploded, that network television has gotten better, I think. I mean, the quality of shows on ABC and CBS and NBC, to me, has gone up a lot. And maybe it was a reflection of having to chase cable a little bit or chase HBO or something. But
definitely was.
But I imagine people come with pitches, and you want to hear good stuff. It's not like you just want to put standard pablum on the air.
No,
it's got to be good these days.
Yeah, we definitely. I mean, the wonderful thing that I feel like happened on network TV 4 or 5 years ago is there's this explosion of character, and it really, it's been fun to play with over the last 4 or 5 years, which we did in some ways borrow from HBO. I mean, they were the ones who were
And
leading with
USA,
that.
I think Monk and, that's
Yeah,
a lot.
yeah. It's funny, Monk. We actually developed at the studio too,
Oh, that's-
and then ABC in their regime back then wouldn't program it. So.
Well, Shawn, you've had, huge success on both cable and network. How many more people watch an average unit than a Shield?
The unit averages around 10.5, 11 million viewers, and the Shield gets about 2.5 to maybe 3, on a premiere or finale. So it's a big difference. Although FX will screen the show 3 or 4 times during the week, and at 10 o'clock it may get 2.5 million viewers. They air it immediately at 11 o'clock, and that may get another million. Friday night may get another 800,000. So it sort of adds up maybe to 4.5, 5 million over the course of the entire week, and then that show also. I mean, I can't tell you how many people have come up to me that say they only watch it on DVD.
Mm-hmm.
That they wait for a DVD set to come out and they'll watch all 13 episodes in the course of a week.
Now, is there any difference with the way you produce one show versus the other?
There's not a lot of difference. And, going back to something that was talked about earlier, I'm not sure this whole idea that as an artist I've got tons of freedom at FX, but I don't have any freedom at CBS. And I doubt Sue took the job just to sort of hand shows off to artists and stand back and, watch what happens. Television is an incredibly collaborative medium. I don't believe in the auteur system in television, and I've always taken the approach that that the people at these networks are there for a good reason, at the studios as well, and that they're smart and they're going to have good ideas, and I don't pretend for a second that I don't make mistakes along the way in my scripts or my cuts, and I want to hear what these people think, and and there'll be times where I'll disagree, and I'll say so, and I hope that they would honor me when we disagree, but FX, I get more notes on my Shield scripts and cuts from FX than I get on my unit scripts and cuts at CBS.
I do think it's less about cable versus network. In my opinion, it's more about the culture of each individual place, which is often taken from the leadership. When I used to work at the studio at Touchstone, we would go into certain networks and they would literally try to change the basic fabric of the show. I did this great pilot that was told backwards, and I remember getting the note at one point, "Can you tell it forwards?" And we shot a pilot to go backwards. No, you can't do that. And so we just try. I feel like each individual place has sort of their boundaries of what type of notes they give. Ours is usually to try and we give a lot of thoughts and we're very involved, but it's usually to try to support the basic concept, the pre-agreed concept of the show.
Right, I feel that's really improved, and now people will say, "Oh, where you should take that show if that's the way you want to do it. Take it someplace else."
And the good news is at NBC they don't read the scripts anymore.
They text them. Hey, so is reality TV just a fad? Please say yes.
No, it's not a fad. I watch, a decent amount.
Is
watch a
it?
ton of it.
What do you really?
It's I think
Bachelor, baby.
6 years in. Bachelor 6, you're in it?
I don't think
He'd
it's
be
going
good.
to, but you have to keep in mind there are so many more networks now than there used to be before reality TV popped up. So, to my mind, there's room for it. There's room for scripted dramas. I mean, if you compare how many scripted dramas there are on TV now to how many there were 15 years ago, it's not like there's fewer. There's more. there's just more channels and they need more programming, and reality TV definitely fills that niche. I don't fear it. I don't think it's a threat to what we do long term.
Not like it used to be. I do feel like there was a while where the
Yeah.
big launches, the fall would have huge reality launches, and now it seems to be back, towards the scripted
Summer series.
The scripted
Yeah.
series are the big launches and the sort of the important, centerpieces of each network's development.
Are you thinking about the year ABC had Who Wants to Be a Millionaire on 5 times or something? That was crazy.
Yeah.
Do you think it's pushing?
There's a business reason for it that when there were 3 channels, the shows that only got 17 million viewers got canceled, but there were of course the shows that got enormous, A-Team and huge ratings, but there was a huge middle pack of shows that were neither great nor bombs, that could exist on the air and made financial sense because you had people only watching the 3 networks. Now, 15, 18 years later, first of all, you have the internet and video games to steal eyeballs from network television. And those middle ground series that get moderate ratings don't make financial sense anymore. They cost too much to produce. And you can get pretty much the same ratings by putting in a reality show. You can put in a great reality show like Survivor or some of the other ones, The Amazing Race, that people have watched for years. And you can put in ridiculous, crappy ones like, I don't know. Temptation Island. So part of the reason for the shift has been economics. I think there's always going to be a desire amongst people for scripted entertainment, for the crafting that writers do. And in a weird way, reality, I used to laugh at it. I really thought it was a fad that would be over in a year or two. And then I realized from looking at those shows, the better ones, really create human drama and tension and suspense.
Well, and they're scripted oftentimes.
Well, yeah. So, there's room for both.
And do you think it will push the price of scripted programming down? Which
I don't think
in
it's
order
the
to
only thing
compete?
pushing it down, but I do think there are going to be pressures. Anytime any company can make a product for less and have the quality of the product be the same, they're gonna try, and they should
Yeah.
try. I can't tell you how many calls we got over at the Shield in the last 5-6 years asking, how do you do this? Especially in the first couple of years when our budget was $1.3 million an episode.
Wow.
what was Star Trek's episode budget?
About 3.
It was. Oh.
I feel like the
Well, the most recent
budgets
budget.
for dramas have gone up, though, in the last couple of years. I think the production quality on network TV has been much, much better.
There's more
I mean,
demand, certainly in pilots, but then I would
No,
hear
but-
horror stories about, okay, you've made this great, wonderful pilot now.
Well, of
do
course,
a lot
you have to make your episodes for at least half of what you make your pilot for, if not, less than that. But I think what networks realized was that you have to compete against DVDs. Like I can go watch $100 million movie at home on my TV box. So if I'm gonna watch a network show, it better look great. I know that ABC, one of the wonderful things about being there is that they really do, especially if it's the home studio providing to the home network, the amount of money they spend on the shows is considerable. They're always looking to bring it down, but it's a lot more than we used to have to work with.
Well, we're 35. Oh, did you want to say something?
No, I do think there are increasing pressures to bring down the cost of shows. But that being said, yeah, we do. Most of our big drama launches are huge. Not like HBO huge, but huge.
But I think a part of that, HBO shows always looked so good. The production quality was always so good. I think finding a way to, but it's just like anything else. We don't have the same subscriber pressure. We have subscriber pressure. We don't have the same advertising pressure. But with certain pilots, they need to feel authentic, and a lot of them, like David Milch's pilot that I talked about, is set in the 1970s. So you just went through an experience with a 1970s pilot too. So making sure that looks authentic is you have to spend the money to make it great. But not. I think the idea would not be that every single HBO show needs to look like a mini movie every single week. Sometimes you can tell a story that's really compelling and looks beautiful. Well, in treatment, for instance, takes place really in one room, so it looks great, but it doesn't, you know, it's obviously on a lower economic model, and it depends on the scope, I think, of the show.
Yeah.
And is it pertinent to this group because in some ways that creates some opportunity that the more established, more expensive writers, there's room for another tier to slip in, I think.
Well, I think that what may create those opportunities is the internet, is the increasing improvement of digital cameras. I mean, there's going to be a time when we can make these shows for, I don't know if it's going to be before I retire, but there's going to be a time when we're now with our pilot debating between the Genesis film package, which is digital video, or shooting on 35mm film. The costs are about the same. But I have a feeling the costs of digital video are going to go down. There are going to be ways in which filmmakers already they're doing this. You'll be able to maybe go make your own show and cut it on your computer, and have a distribution platform, which will be the internet. Now, whether you're still going to need, if it's on CBS.com, you're going to get more eyeballs than if you just create your own website to show your show. But we're in this sea change, technological sea change right now, and I think the business is feeling it and reeling from it a little bit. And a friend of mine said to me, his daughter's 14, and he said, this is about piracy too, but do you want to see one of these movies, Iron Man or something? It wasn't that, but one of these movies. And she said, I've already seen it on Quicksilver. And he's like, well, what are you talking about? And she took him to a website. They watched the movie. It was out in theaters. She was watching the movie with some guy's head in the corner because it had been filmed from inside a theater, and so she got to watch the movie. He claimed that his 14-year-old daughter couldn't give a damn about the production value of the thing. She just wanted to see the story and see the actors and kind of. But she had it on a portion of her computer screen, and on the other side she could be chatting and texting her friends at the same time. And then on the upper right-hand corner, it was like news stories coming up. So that her 14-year-old is dividing their attention between the movie that's been stolen from the movie theater, the texting her friends about some handsomeness of the actor there or what they're doing tonight, and then other stuff coming up on the scroll bar. So that's what we're. Who knows what we're looking
Right.
for.
Well, I remember 5 years ago being brought in to see a test of HD TV, and there's all this concern because you could see the actress's bad skin through the makeup, and now everyone's watching on their iPhones. So,
I can barely read and go to the bathroom.
So first of all, we're 37 minutes in. No one's used the word monetize, which I think is pretty fabulous. And but it's time to bring up new media. But I have a specific question for the storytellers on the panel. So the internet, someone else noted, offers an opportunity to be both bored and entertained at the same time. And did you all watch that video with the crazy divorcee, Trisha Walsh Smith, with the laser eyes? Yeah. And there's that moment where she's working herself up, and then she grabs her tarot cards and she picks one up and it says victory. And as a writer, I remember thinking, I never would have thought of that. And how do you compete with the wackiness of real life?
Well, scripted TV is all about being repeatable. The thing is, you're not going to watch that divorcee 6 months from now. She sort of made her point, and she's moved on, and we've moved on. There's a reason you won't watch the same squirrel on a skateboard time after time. You may watch it once.
Wrong.
You may watch it once, but you're not gonna. People aren't going to be able to make money off that. So it's the difference between being an oddity that lures our attention once to the screen, with something that hopefully we create things that people invest in. I'm married to an actress on The Shield, and so people occasionally recognize her, and they know that she's married to me, so then they realize who I am, because as writers we never really get recognized. I occasionally get recognized when I'm with my wife. And you see when these people come up and talk to you how invested they are in your shows. Now, it's not every single person, especially in The Shield, it may be, 1% of the population, but that 1% really gives a damn about that show and just, and has that same sort of intense look that Divorcee has, when they talk to you. And that's because, you've created something, whatever the show is, whatever the network is, you created something that they think about that morning. Oh, this show's on tonight. I'm looking forward to sort of watching that, which is different than just surfing the web and coming across something that goes, oh, that's sort of crazy, that's sort of interesting. And I think that's the thing that we can provide, and that hopefully the country and the rest of the world will, still devote their time to.
Brannon, are you a gamer at all?
Moderately, yeah.
Because ever since Grand Theft Auto 4 came out, I have no husband. So I think it's very, how do you compete with a story that makes you the lead character?
Well, they're different mediums. I may be just repeating Shawn here, but there's a difference between being the main character and sitting back and letting his story take you away, where you don't want to be one of the main characters, which I think is kind of the point of reading a book or watching a show or seeing a movie. Very often I don't think people want the interactive experience. Remember those books, the little choose your adventure books?
Yeah.
They didn't work.
But would you be interested if someone came to you and said, could you write a story for a video game?
I don't know that I could, because I have no idea how it's done. I certainly would be interested, yeah. It'd be something new to do.
Yeah. How about you, Chris?
Well, first of all, right now the internet, we always joke about it, like the internet's just home movies. It's like America's Funniest Videos. It's just and I've also spent a lot of time looking at web-based series, or at least some of them, because I'm looking to see if there's talent there that might be translatable to 1 hour drama. And I've seen some good stuff. There was one thing called Sam Has 7 Friends, the premise being, that this actress in Hollywood has 7 friends, and in 85 days, one of them's going to kill her. And so you watch a 3-minute episode every day until an appointed day when one of those people you've come to know will kill her. And in fact, Stage 9, which is the Disney digital studio, signed them to a deal. Again, you can't monetize that business right now, and so the deal they made is quite a bit smaller than a writer would get for trying to go for a 1 hour drama that's going to be seen by millions. But my point is this: television. What I always say to any writer, and I say to everybody in this room, if you're creating your own pilot or your own show, it's real simple. It's about creating. Well, it's simple, but it's really difficult. You got to create 8 or 9 characters who the audience wants to invite into their home, into their living rooms, every single week. They don't have to be nice people. Witness The Sopranos. I wanted them in my living room every Sunday night, and at the same time, you're also required to create a setting for those characters and a concept for the series that feels new and different, like we haven't seen it 12,000 times before. So, but at its core, it's about attaching to those characters. I go to the movies for a different experience. I go to the movies to see Iron Man, punch his way through a tank or something, and that's that costs $200 million to do. I'm not sitting at home on TV looking for that. I'm going to the movies to get the hell out of my house and away from my kids. So, they're different mediums. One of the problems with the internet for me is I can't sit and watch. I couldn't watch an hour show on my computer. Like my computer's at my desk. I don't want to enjoy it that way.
But that will change.
That will change.
We have
People do
Apple
now.
TV.
It's
Yeah,
a
I do.
generational thing, yeah.
Yeah, that's a generational thing.
I mean, I do all the time.
Yeah, you do.
I think that's coming.
You do? You
Yeah.
watch a whole
Yeah.
hour there?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Oh, well.
But I do think.
But honestly, part of the difference is you work at your computer. That's where your job is too. And
Right.
that's not,
Right.
that's not really where your job is. So
Right.
maybe
Right.
some of it is.
Right,
Right.
trying to get away from
But
that.
the two will be combined at some
Yeah.
point.
Yeah, the two will be combined, which is, obviously.
I do think that the key to what you just said though is that scripted TV is about emotional attachment, and you don't get that from, the squirrel on the skateboard.
skateboard.
You just don't. I mean, that's what we're looking for. We're looking for America to fall in love. At least at ABC, America to fall in love with your characters and want to spend time with them. And once you're emotionally attached to characters, then you're going to come back every week. and as
Right.
long as the show's good.
That's right.
As executives, would you rather read a spec script or watch a 10-minute DVD spec? The Always Sunny in Philadelphia, which I think is hilarious. They shot something, I think, and
Yeah, I talked with them. They shot that thing for $200. They shot a thing for $200, and they said most of that money went towards pizza. And then when FX picked up, they gave them more money to sort of reshoot the pilot. But it still looks rough even now. I think they make those for like almost $400,000 an episode. Those episodes, but
and Saw was sold on the two Australian guys, 22 and 24, wrote a fantastic script, gave it to their agents, and he said, I can sell this, no problem. Phone rings 10 minutes later, it's them again saying, and I want to direct, and my friend wants to star. And he said, well, that makes it a little trickier, so they went out and they shot the reverse bear trap, I think was the one scene they shot. So do you think that, are you seeing more of that?
I think that sometimes people have something they want to say, or a writer has an idea, and sometimes things get lost in translation. You can't understand someone's intention, and a spec script I always think is a great way to kind of create the world and show everybody what it is that's kind of living in you. And whether you shoot something, or I always think of Flight of the Concords, which I'm obsessed with pre my new job, but now it's even more exciting. But you couldn't. I think if those guys had come in to pitch that show, you wouldn't have really understood it necessarily. But people who had been following their comedy had seen them on stage, had seen the rapport, had heard the music. I think when it became time to greenlight that series, which was done on a lower budget model. It was easy to do. It was like everyone loved them, knew it, understood what it is they wanted to do, and they kind of get a pass. No one is sitting there looking through the scripts and saying, I don't know if this character's likable, this doesn't make sense. It's like you understand it. So anytime a writer, I think, can kind of establish a world in advance of sort of the actual production of a series, I think it's beneficial because, especially with things that are a little bit more unique.
Yeah, we read spec scripts all the time. Desperate Housewives was a spec script I read when I was at the studio. Very infrequently would I say that they actually go on to be huge hits, but very frequently do they serve as, great samples to introduce yourself to executives. We still don't get that many self-made sizzle reels.
Really?
Yeah.
And
The Shield was a spec. I'd written it for a studio, but FX read that as a script. It wasn't developed at FX.
And would you, has anyone within the system started making their own little presentations yet? Like,
Well, networks order presentations of
Right.
pilots. Why, I'm not quite sure, because, in fact, Josh, maybe you could answer that, because to me, if I was asked as a producer, writer to make a presentation, I'd be happy they're letting me go shoot something, but I'd also be sad because it would be very hard to make a 20-minute presentation, convey a flow of story, and get you hooked emotionally, as opposed to doing the entire.
I totally agree with you. It's this is the first year we've done presentations at ABC,
Right.
and we did it solely because we had half the budget, and so we wanted to make. We didn't just want to make 5 pilots,
Right.
so we're making 5 pilots and then 3 presentations, low-cost pilots, which are going to be an experiment. Other networks have been doing them for a long time.
Right.
But it's our first time, and we'll see how it works. It's going to be a challenge.
I'll second what Josh said about if you write the market is flooded with spec pilots. So it used to be they were extremely rare, like nobody, you'd never see one. And now a few people, led by Mark Cherry, have had, and you, his spec beat out a pilot I had.
and
at FX that
Yeager's
year.
spec pilot just got picked up at CBS.
Every year there's a few. Swingtown was a spec pilot
Yeah.
that got picked up to series. There's always a few, and usually, I always feel like with specs, it's a great way in a world where you're trying to emerge as a writer and try to find your agent or your studio or the person that's going to be your champion. There's no better way to do it than with a spec, and I believe great spec pilots find their way into the right hands. So.
I agree with that, and also whether or not they actually get made, because again, 99.9% of them don't. Writers always ask me, should I have a, what's the last, should I do a heroes spec? They take whatever the
Yeah.
hot show is. Well, you should have maybe one of those, but that just tells me you can mimic the style of Tim Krang or the writers of Heroes. So the original spec pilot, while it may not get made, if it is truly different and original, I know that when we're looking, I know I'm sure the same is for Brannon and Shawn, you're trying to staff up your show, and
There's nothing, I will read a spec pilot first, or a spec feature, anything but another ER script or or another, whatever shows are hot at the time. Not that you won't read it if you're interested in a writer and that's all they have, but it's much more fun to read an original piece of writing.
And from our perspective, we usually need both. We usually like to read one piece of original material.
Well, it's a good advice to
And-
new writers is to do both.
Yeah.
Have a feature, have one of
Yeah,
each.
Because I do feel like they are somewhat different skills. One is being able to create your own world and create your own characters, and that is, obviously, one skill. And the other is
Being able to mimic.
Being able to mimic, and that's a lot of what I think being a staff writer is, coming with your own ideas and your own stories, but then being able to mimic the voice of the creator, or the creator of that show, not that creator.
Have you worked with Dom Belisario? I know there are panels later that are more about breaking in, but I do have a specific question, and I don't know everyone's story on this panel, but so often breaking in stories deal with, and I had a friend, I had a buddy, I had a girlfriend who knew someone. What do you do if you don't know anyone?
Well, one thing the fascinating thing about breaking in stories to me is that everyone is so different.
Right.
I mean, it's amazing to me. No one really has the same story, and most people I know didn't know someone.
Oh, good.
I didn't.
Did you know someone?
No,
I didn't know
and
someone.
first of all, I didn't come out stupidly until I was 29 years old, thinking you could easily get a Hollywood career in New York. And when I got out here, I did realize that connections, relationships were important to have, if for no other reason than to get a better sense of the business and know more about what people were looking for. And what I did, again, I came out here with no money, but I knew it wasn't easy to get a paid job in the system. So what I said I met a producer at some party, and it turned out the person had like this tiny little deal at Paramount, and I said to him, do you need an assistant? And he said, well, we don't have a budget for the assistant. We don't have a paid assistant in our deal. And I said, no, I'm willing to work for free. So I worked for that person on a part-time schedule for free, and did crappy menial work to pay apartment rent. And through that, then I'm on the lot at Paramount, and I'm looking around at who the producers are and how the system operates, et cetera. And I did that for a full year. And of course, when you're on the lot there, then you're meeting other people. And some of those people, 15, 16 years ago, whatever it was, are executives I deal with to this day, or producers I still deal with. And it is a network of relationships. That's in any business. You're dealing with people and getting to know those people and have them become fans of your work. The other thing is, write a fantastic script, like really, truly great and original, and you'll start to gain fans, and then you'll start to get meetings, and you'll get to know those people, and hopefully those people can hire you.
I definitely, do agree. It is a community in television. I think more than even in film, more than in most industries. It's a community of people who work together, and a lot of us know each other. It is a lot about relationships. Once you're in, getting in. For me, I went the executive route. It was, I got a job temping at the Museum of TV and Radio, so I had something on my resume, and that just led one thing to another.
I've heard stories now, obviously, probably most of you have heard stories about writers' assistants on shows eventually getting a chance to do a script, and then, miraculously end up running the show 3 years later after deposing their boss. But, but it's like All About Eve. But I'm hearing now it's so competitive to get a writing assistant job that somebody just told me a story of a staff writer from last season who now that things are so much tighter, was applying for writing assistant jobs. In other words, on other shows, so that hopefully they could climb back up to staff writer, having already been a staff writer on another show. So it's a cold, cruel world out there, and I think it's either worming your way in and connections, or a script that just sort of really gets everybody's attention, which is very difficult to write. I didn't write one of those until I'd been in the business for 12 years. Seriously, it's like it took a very long time to write a pilot that somebody said, "Oh wow, that's really fresh and original." Because what I was trying to do for the first 10 years of my career was mimic what other successful people were doing.
Did you ever buy or hire someone off of a Spec Shield?
No, I've only read one Spec Shield in my life, and that was from one of my assistants, Emily, who's here somewhere today, and she actually wrote a good one. I had writers on the show who would read them. There's legal issues that you get into, and they can't be unsolicited, and the studio gets nervous, and and you don't want to get in the thing of, well, I wrote a script that where they busted a crackhead, and you've busted a crackhead in this episode, thief.
What are the odds?
Sort of thing. But it's really, when you spend 12 hours a day focused on that show, it's tough to read a spec because you have all these little rules and that people aren't aware of, and it's hard to impress somebody on a show. It can be done. I heard of Tim Minear writing an X-Files script that got him a job on the X-Files.
Well, this guy wrote a phenomenal X-Files script, and I happened to have written one, and so I knew all the show. I knew Chris Carter and Howard Gordon, and I called Howard and I said, "This guy wrote an X-Files that is so fantastic. You can just take it up to Vancouver and shoot it. You don't need to change a word. I know the show. You can just do it." And I sent it to Howard, and nothing. And a year later, somebody on staff of that show happened to find it in a slush pile there. And I don't think Howard read it when I sent it to him, but a year later somebody else found it and gave it to him and read it, and Tim was on staff several weeks later.
Yeah, so you hear stories of that, but that's very rare, and so I didn't want to read Shield specs for the most part.
But think about it now. It's like, oh my God, they write this show better than I do. Okay, I quit. You can have my job. You use a great sample of the Shield to get on Boomtown or on.
Yeah, I heard of people using Shield specs to get on Alias and other shows.
Yeah.
That would make me happy.
Well, isn't the advice, or it seems to be, to when you pick a spec script to write, pick a show you really love, not just a show that's popular. Pick something that is inside you, that you respond to, because it will just be a lot easier.
Well, I think also one piece of advice I would give is try to be one of the first people with a spec script from that show. I'm really going to age myself right now, but when I came out, I was trying to do sitcoms and dramas, and I wrote a spec Friends before that first season was even over with. That got me some attention, got me some meetings. I literally had a studio exec say, "Oh, this is the first spec Friends I've read," and I'm sure 3 years later, people were sick of reading, a spec Friends. So, it's finding that show that appeals to you, that you feel like you can write, but also isn't going to be the 50th.
Well, and it also can't be from a show that's so obscure that it's not you need people who are reading it to know the show. So I wouldn't go out and I would say you probably could go out and write a Mad Men right now because the creative community is watching that show. But there are lots of shows out there that the creative community isn't really watching, and you just have to be careful of not writing one of those shows, because then if I pick up a show that I'm not watching, I'm not going to be able to tell if it's good or not.
Right.
So.
Do you want to? Should we open it up to questions? Any questions you guys want to ask each other? All right. Well, raise your hand.
ABC? Sorry.
Are there questions?
Sue, what are you looking for? We're all here to meet Sue.
I was going to say, anything you want to do, Shawn. Anything you want to do.
All right. We'll start over here.
Shawn, you just said that you came out trying to do drama and sitcoms at the same time.
Well, I came out trying to do sitcoms, and then when I didn't get hired, I thought, well, maybe I'll try dramas as well, because I'd won a comedy award for playwriting, and so I had an initial entry into the sort of sitcom world back when people actually made sitcoms, and but then there was this period during the mid '90s where there seemed to be a bridge where like Northern Exposure came on the air and it had comedic elements, and Larry Sanders Show came on HBO, and it was a comedy, but it had a lot of drama stuff, and so that's when I sort of started writing both. I don't know if that was your question.
I guess I just wanted to, if you are interested in doing both, I've been told it's kind of confusing to people to show up with, a half-hour spec sitcom and then a 1-hour pilot, even if you are aiming for a kind of, dramatic, a comic hour.
Well, every story is different. My very first staff job was on Nash Bridges, and they hired me after reading a spec Larry Sanders and a spec NYPD Blue, which, were very different, but...
And yet, just on a pure format level, was the Larry Sanders written in a 1-hour style, like a single camera style?
It was written, it was written as
And
single
that's the
camera.
thing
was
about, like,
single
say, maybe
spaced.
if you wrote My Name is Earl or The Office, it's a single camera show, so it's going to be, it'll look like it's not going to, a sitcom script looks different, doesn't it?
It did, but I wrote a lot of sitcom scripts too. I mean, I wrote Friends and Cheers and Roseanne and News Radio and all that stuff. So maybe it's confusing, but I just looked at it as twice the chance of getting a job. I mean, I had meetings that, listen, I got rejected from Boy Meets World. There are a lot of like really bad sitcoms that I couldn't get work on, but I was getting some meetings there, and I had a manager and an agent that were open to. We'll try to sell you to some people as a drama writer, and we'll try to sell you to other people as a comedy writer.
And again, you came out here in the 70s, so that was a long time ago. But I think the most important thing to note is that the executives and the business of half-hour and 1 hour are completely separate. So that, for instance, I couldn't name a single half-hour executive in the entire business, maybe shy of one who happens to be a friend. And so, but I could name you every drama executive in the network and most of the cable ones. So that's the thing about split focus, which is if you have these two things, you actually, your story is just a little bit. I mean, I know every story is different, but they are two separate businesses.
The only thing I'll add to that is I do feel like the terms drama and comedy are in some ways misnomers nowadays, because we do half-hour. The half-hour business and the hour business are separate businesses. At ABC, we do hour-long comedies basically.
Desperate Housewives.
Ugly Betty. We definitely. I mean, they have to have more story drive than in a half hour. But I do feel like they're separate businesses, but there's a lot of blending. So I do read single camera half hour spec scripts as a sample, usually in conjunction with an original piece of longer of hour or feature.
All right, well, he wants to.
Wait for the mic, please.
Wait, Andy's running.
If somebody comes to you, you get an idea for a new project yourself, how do you look at it? Do you look at the demographics? Do you try and figure out what branded network it's good for? How do you begin to place where you take that script and what do you do with it, or that show that you have in mind? Do you look at the 5-year character arc and try to put together a Bible? How do you approach it?
Well, there are a couple of things. I've had the unfortunate, chance to go to testing sessions on pilots and shows, and they're really unpleasant. But one of the things they do at the end of them is they've shown this pilot to a group of people from Van Nuys and Tarzan and everything, and one of the last questions they ask is, what network do you see this show on? And it's amazing how often right they are. When we did it for the unit, it was like 65% of people thought CBS. And so when I see when a writer comes to me with an idea or I have my own idea, I just apply that same test. Where would I expect to turn the dial and find this thing on? Would I expect to, watch it on HBO on Sunday nights, or would I expect it to be, ABC's on Tuesdays? And you have that sense. The whole Bible thing, you want to have a sense, I think, that where your story is going. I don't correct me if I'm wrong, you don't want to read a 50-page Bible along with a pilot script about what every single episode is going to be, but you do want to have a sense of, maybe where the characters are going in the first season, where they might go after that. But I think sometimes that writers, I certainly did this when I was younger, you get bogged down in the details too much sometimes. When you're pitching a show, you sort of want to give them a sense of what's going to be there each week. Who are the characters that you're going to follow, who you're going to invite into your home and everything. They don't want to know every single beat of Act 1. That will be stuff to be figured out later. Is this a show that I want at my place? Correct me if I'm wrong.
That is so much more important. In fact, the pitches for me that don't work is when, the writer comes in and he or she's been talking for, 45 minutes of your pitch, and then it goes, and then that's the end of Act 1. And you're like, oh my God. No, we really do, when we hear pitches for original concepts, we love to know that this is a series that can live and breathe for 5-10 years. It's the characters, it's falling in love with these relationships, it's where they're going, it's maybe, part of the pitch should be the pilot story. Sometimes, writers can come in with a pitch that is basically the pilot story, because it's a premise pilot, but embroidered beautifully with the characters and where these people are going and how it's going to feel and live and breathe and smell, and you just want to know everything in a pitch, and not the pilot story.
But like on the unit, David Mamet and I didn't pitch a single beat from the pilot. We didn't know what the pilot would be, but we knew that we were interested in this world of special forces soldiers and their wives, and we told some stories and gave a feel of what that show would be, and then had to figure out, oh geez, what's the pilot now after CBS bought it.
Must have been a tough sell with Shawn Ryan and David Mamet.
I was just thinking that.
It was a tough sell. It was a tough sell because you're selling, a story about a modern day war that's unpopular. So it did have. So I appreciate the comments, but it was tough.
Sure, we'll go with you. Yeah, in front.
I have a question. In terms of, do you ever buy pilots that have already been produced? Because I've had opportunities to go with a production company that were interested in a pilot, and I wonder if that's a valid route to actually have them develop it, especially they're sort of a name brand that does it, or do you prefer to develop them in-house?
When you say produced, do you mean produced, put on film, or
Actually shot.
Doesn't happen very often. Nowadays there is an increasing, people are really investigating this business model of going and financing things overseas and then bringing them back and selling them to U.S. networks. So I think we are going to see a pop in that in the next few years, but it's been very rare up to this point.
Because it's not a great business model to produce for any company to produce. It's so expensive to produce something, and you're not going to. Your chances of recouping the money are pretty low. So it's very rare. But I think you're right about the foreign market.
Also, the network or studio has not had a chance to develop that project, and they may look at it and say, "This is an interesting spec pilot that we'll buy the concept and develop it ourselves." Maybe, I don't know.
Well,
I'm not sure. My advice would be, if someone's offering to produce a pilot, do it. I don't know what
Yeah,
your.
that's true.
Why you're waffling on that one.
I also think that it's an interesting thing to talk about the format business, which is that certain agents and executives started to realize that a hit show in the UK could come over here and become American Idol. That's one example. I can think of tons of drama ones. If
Life on Mars.
Life on Mars, et cetera, et cetera. Shows that, and I have two thoughts about that. The first is, for some reason or other, just like in the feature film business, they buy every comic book now. There seems to be some comfort level that executives take when you can bring them something that is branded. It makes perfect sense to me that you'd make Spider-Man as a movie. Almost every kid knows what Spider-Man is. And the success of that movie only yields more. That's happening more in television now, where the decision for an executive to trigger a series is, there's so much money involved. It could mean their job if it works or doesn't. And so there is a certain comfort level when you can say, this series in Israel was like the top hit show for the whole year, you know? And then you can, and then actually the executive can sit down and watch episodes of it if it's dubbed or translated into English or subtitled, and go, wow, I really like this. This moves me. I do think this can translate to the American market. So you have a little built-in testing ground overseas. There's another part of me that says this is the death of originality in our entertainment business, because really mediocre shows I see now sold over at networks to remain nameless, NBC, and also you know, a lot of times, like Life on Mars is a good example. Like, I'm going to be interested to see how the creative team behind that show takes a series that only lasted 7 episodes and turns it into a network 22 episode a year thing. But what I say to you guys is this: first of all, when you go in to do your pitch, you know, you don't pitch your pilot story beat by beat by beat, but you do pitch something cinematic and interesting, because you have to get there. They hear 450 pitches or 300 to 450 pitches a year of series, most of them from experienced writers. So you better be saying something that makes Josh, like lifts Josh off his seat, or it's going to be a pass.
Krish, by the way, should teach a seminar just in pitching. He's the best pitcher that ever comes in.
Thank you. Well, yeah. Thank you. But also another avenue is to try to seek out some sort of book format, some kind of branded thing, because if you come into Sue or Josh with something that's right for their network or feels right for their network, and you have some life rights, or you got somehow to the producer of some series in Korea and you got the rights to it, you know, you actually may have a better shot of selling it. You know?
Well, I think you were supposed to get a question, and then I'll ask you.
I did. Oh, I did, and it's kind of similar to the question that was just asked, so I don't want to try to repeat it too much. But rather, as opposed to production companies that have created pilots, there was a question earlier about self-produced pilots, and taking maybe shorts that are maybe like produced at like a USC with kind of a good production value, but they're shot in such a way that they are kind of translatable to pilots. Are you willing to take a look at things like that in consideration for shows or for writers, on a show? Like, how quick are you to actually look at a DVD that comes across your desk?
I think at a DVD, if the DVD comes along with a pilot script, I think that's compelling. I think it's a challenge. When you write a script, you want to see if you can create a world in a period of time and the characters. When you do something that's in a shorter form, it really has to be pretty compelling. So I'd say, no matter how much money you're starting with, you just have to make sure you use that money to tell the story, and it's never going to be enough money to compete with what a presentation looks like at any network. But if you can get across your point or your tone, or sort of the world that you're trying to create in a smaller form, I think a format, I think it's a smart and good thing to do. Also, you can see whether or not for yourself it's really sustainable. Does it work? People always have ideas about what they think great shows are when they sit down to write the script, which is why I always, as an agent, used to tell people to write specs, or because sometimes it's living in your brain, but when you try to translate it and you try to get it down on paper, it doesn't come together. It's a good exercise.
And let me give you two examples to illustrate that. On the one hand, I don't know that handing in a student film or a USC-produced thing is necessarily the greatest idea, because you're giving it to an executive who's used to looking at pilot material that cost $8 million to make. So like the minute it flickers onto the screen, yeah, I know it was actually a student film. I know they didn't have that kind of money, but subconsciously I'm comparing it to something that is much bigger and larger. And so to make the leap that, like, oh gosh, this thing shot for $200 worth of pizza is going to end up being a $7 million pilot on my network. It's a hard leap to make. So sometimes it's better to go in and let their pitch and or something written really beautifully that lets their imagination conjure it with the right production
We're at the
value.
Writers Guild. I assume you all want to be are writers or trying to break into writing. I think you should just write. The clean, simple answer is write a script.
The other thing is,
if we were at the Directors Guild,
right,
It might be a
story.
different answer. Then you're talking about produced material as a calling card.
And produced material, I think, works better for comedy than it does for drama. And so I think it's an important distinction.
Right.
I would say I agree with everything you say, and yet I would also say that that's not a reason not to do it. I just wouldn't give it to the executives.
Well,
I think there's something very valuable to be learned from seeing and hearing your words spoken by actors. Because I find that my writing now is a lot less wordy than it used to be before I got used to actors saying the words and when I had to get into an editing room. I think editing is one of the best things you can do as a writer because it teaches you so much about writing. It is writing in many regards. And so I would do it. I just wouldn't give the final product to them.
But I agree with him. But I also have one caveat. There was a series idea I had, which was about a U.S. Treasury agent teamed with an FBI agent. And what they did was they went at it was like they trailed the money. The show was called Money, and it was forensic accounting with kick-ass agents, and so I was trying to figure out how do I make that real. I mean, because it's potentially forensic accounting is potentially a deadly dull subject. And by the way, when I wrote the script, that was borne out. However, what I did was I called a friend, an editor, and I said, here's what I want you to do. I want you to take the Pink Floyd song Money, and I want you to go and take every image from $100 million movies that you can find, bank heists, cars screeching up, Bentleys, Mercedes Maybach cars, diamonds, yachts, and I want you to cut together something really hot to the Pink Floyd song Money. And anyway, he's a great editor, and he just went out to his video store, got a whole bunch of big, high production value movies, and all of a sudden, within a week or two, he sent me this thing that was like I watched it 100 times. It was so cool.
Right.
And
This just happened with us with David Simon's pilot that just got turned in. He turned it in with a DVD, which was just it's set in New Orleans. It was all about sort of the subject matter he was writing about, and he turned in a soundtrack with it. And it was great. It was a really great experience. I mean, the script, of course, it's amazing, but the whole experience of seeing the world, I thought, was really smart.
Yeah, I mean, look, I went around to NBC and Fox. I went to all the different networks, and I just would sit back and I go, before we start, just watch this.
Let me show you the
tone
of the
piece.
piece.
Let me show you the tone of the piece, and they would be so jazzed, that then suddenly forensic accounting sounded, their mind was, oh my God.
I actually remember one time. Mick G came into ABC and literally just put on a clip of fast cars and explosions, and this was for
Fastlane.
For Fastlane, which ended up at Fox. And literally the president took out his credit card after and went, "I want it," and put it on the table. And that was just from seeing Mick G, the combination of Mick G and a sizzle reel with fast cars and explosions.
So visual aids sometimes help.
All right, you've been.
Hi, I wanted to talk about the art of pitching. How do you tell a story in a pitch broadly enough so that, I think you used the word cinematically, so that people get the scope of it, but also specifically enough so that, the person hearing the pitch falls in love with the characters that you just told them about? How do you do that successfully?
I do think there are panels more specifically about that later. Is that correct on from the Writers Guild? But maybe
Sounds like Chris is the guy to ask.
According to Josh. Thank you.
But maybe we'll keep this brief and that people will expand it later. Yeah.
Well, I'll just tell you the process of what I do. I think about what's interesting about the show in the broad strokes. I think about the characters and the way. Here's what no executive likes, because I got really tired of saying it myself. It's like, okay, here's our series. Luke McNeil, he's 45 years old. He's handsome, but you know what? He has had a tough. In other words, this laundry list of characters and their traits is really boring. You want to introduce characters in action, like you would in a script, doing something that really reveals who they are. But my point is this: I figure out what the pitch is going to be. I type up a script. It'll be 6 to 8 pages long. These are trade secrets here. So, and then I revise. I pitch to friends. I pitch to my non-writing producing partner. I get feedback. I revise the script. I'm doing it in front of the mirror almost. Like an actor prepares for an audition, that's what the pitch is. It's an audition of you and your idea and your enthusiasm in pitching it. So that by the time I go into Josh, trust me, I make it feel like it's just the first time it's coming out of my mouth. It's the 10th or 12th time it's come out of my mouth, and it's really honed.
And yet at the same time, there has to be an improvisational skill to it because the best pitches are somewhat interactive.
Yeah, that's right. And you know your show well enough so that when he asks a pertinent question, you have an answer, or you tap dance for an answer.
Isn't it why it's sometimes easier to write the spec? I find pitches very hard to write.
To me, it's really simple. It's when I think of a movie I love, or I just saw a movie this is one of the great movies I've seen, and someone says, "What's it about?" I don't say, "Well, it fades in, and the guy walks into and the characters are this." I actually just kind of you say what enthused you about the movie. You give a kind of synopsis and say, "Here's what was really cool about it," which could be the same could be said of your idea. That's one way to think about encapsulating it.
But the player makes fun of that picture. Do you remember that scene?
Yeah.
It's a rainy night. Did you have something to add?
That's the movie that ends up getting made.
It is, and it's good.
No, the only thing I would add is if you're not enthusiastic, why should they be about it? I mean, you should love this thing, and you should talk about it, about what you love about it. And I've seen people come in with notes or things written down, and that doesn't work for me, because I've had people starting to pitch to me, as I'm trying to do producing stuff as well, and it should just come from the heart, whether you have to memorize it, whether you just think so much about it that you can talk extemporaneously, whatever it is. I would just go in and be enthusiastic and keep it short. They'll ask questions if they're interested in it, but they get bored if you start going too long.
Over there? Sure, front row.
Hi. First of all, thanks for being here. I really appreciate your presence. This is great. My question is for Josh and Sue, and of course anyone else. So you've read a pilot, you really like it, and now you're going to meet the writer. So what's your expectation of the writer coming in? How many episodes do you want them to be able to pitch to you? What is it that you need to hear from them once you've read the work and you like it? Now, what do you need to hear from them to say yes?
It's really again about filling out the world and knowing that being able to be convinced that there are an infinite number of episodes and an infinite number of places these characters or plots could go. Often a pilot script can't convey all that. You do try to set up in every pilot script an expectation of what the series is going to be week to week, but if we do read a spec script that we love, it's almost always it's almost always followed by a series of meetings to discuss what the show is and what the tone is, and to make sure that sort of that the writer has the vision of the next 5 years in their head too.
Well, and I think what Josh had said earlier is so true about people falling in love with characters and wanting to return to them. And so I always think you want to hear what the world is, what it looks like, how it feels, and then sort of what's going to happen. Not in a way, that, as Chris said, you don't want to go, and then he's going to do this, and then he's going to do this. But saying, and this character eventually will do this, and this one will do this. And you see how they intersect, and you see how there's something that's sustainable, because really, I think that's the key. There's great stories you could tell. They're best served in an hour format or a 2-hour movie. They're not necessarily a series. So that, I would say, showing that there's longevity to it.
Okay, there's a question right behind you.
Hi. Let's say you have some real life experience that pertains to a show that's on the air right now. You're a mentalist, psychic, ER doctor or something like that, and or someone who is, and you write, they tell you don't write the spec for the show that the actual show isn't going to read your spec. It has to be a comparable show. But your experience pertains exactly to this show, or, is it something that, and I know it used to be the case that they would always buy like 3 freelance scripts a year or something like that for a show, 3 outside scripts. Does that still happen, and is it?
Yeah, there's a guild rule that you have to develop, at least go through story, I believe it is, with, on a 22 episode order. It's less on a FX, HBO 13 episode model. I think it's 2 episodes. But yeah, on the unit, we're going to have to hire some freelancers this year. And we've had a couple of people come in with military experience. And that matters. If you have something, I'd hit it really hard. There's a whole history of law shows hiring people who used to be lawyers. There's, David Milch hooked up with Bill Clark, who was a cop. So I think that as showrunners, and I've definitely seen it with networks, they love it if you've got something in your DNA, in your past, in your history that applies, that lends some sort of authenticity to the story that either you yourself is trying to tell, or if you have a show, something that people can bring and say, well, I did this, and here's what happened to me. I would hit that super hard.
Absolutely, write that show. Like, whether it's for the show that is gonna, even if that show won't read it, that's a great story to tell. If you have experience, then you can talk to agents about that. You can talk to executives about that. You can say, I wrote this, and it's based on this experience. That's a great story. And if you can tell that story to folks, that's going to make the script come alive even more. So write it, definitely.
Just to follow up, because you were talking about getting the rights to something in Korea or something like that. But if you're a writer without a production deal, and you know someone or meet someone who has this incredible story, and you don't want to steal it, but you're onto something, how would you go about? I don't know.
Well, the answer is simple. The first is, ideas themselves aren't copyrightable. So if you research and find some fascinating story, it is within your right to try to fictionalize it, as long as you don't say this is Susie's story. So that effectively research can equal stealing, and you may be able to create a fictional version of what has interested you so much. The other thing to do is, and I know many people who do this, is everybody in Hollywood's looking under a rock to find a great story to tell, and once in a while you'll find one. And will you be able to compete with a major production company with tons of development money on a big hit series in the UK? No, you won't. But you may find that very special story that nobody else has actually found. And you may write a letter to that writer or that person and say, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to give you a buck to option it for 2 years. And if we set it up at a legitimate Hollywood place, then they'll have to make a deal with you and me. In other words, you can get rights for surprisingly little money if you're convincing and charming and can. Yeah, I mean, it just depends on whose story it is and what the idea is. I'll tell you this: if the person lives in Nebraska, you got a better chance calling from LA to have them agree to it than if they're here in Hollywood, trying to sell their story. So it takes a lot of ingenuity, and but it is doable. And again, I mean, the way I started writing was I would read stuff, and if I was researching a script, I would read some research and I go, wow, that's really interesting. And then I thought, well, if it really interests me reading it, then I might as well figure a way to put it into the script because it'll probably interest somebody else. So, yeah, I mean, research is sort of stealing in a way.
Can we take one more question from this side of the room? He's had his hand up.
Thanks. I was wondering if you could talk about feature writers who've had some success that are moving into TV and for the first time pitching original ideas. Do you welcome them? Do you find they have a really large learning curve?
Yeah, it's interesting how people have talked about how the TV business is becoming more like the feature business in some ways. I think the worst way it's happening is that networks seem more and more likely to go forward with projects without a writer at first, or they have a feature writer that they know is never going to follow the series. And the assumption is, well, we can just find someone to run that show. We've got this, and we've got this, and we've got this. And to me, having come up as a writer and now a showrunner, I mean, to me, that should be the first piece of business.
CBS is good about that. They always put a showrunner in place.
Okay. But listen, there's a little difference between feature writers and TV writers other than experience, what they're used to. So I have no problem with someone who's done feature work coming and doing TV in the same way that, I'm trying to do a little bit more feature work now, even though, most of my work has been in TV. It is a different thing. And, J.J. Abrams was a feature writer who sort of came in and did TV, and he was well suited for it. But there's a different storytelling you have to tell in your head. It's not just about the 2 hours. It's about what are we going to do for all of season 1? What are we going to do for season 2? And if feature writers want to come in and sort of, I sort of get a little resentful when the sort of big feature writers come in. Well, I'll write this 1 hour thing and then disappear. Yeah. And then leave. Because to me, television shows succeed or fail on episode 8. They don't really succeed or fail so much. Well, they can fail on the pilot, but you never succeed only with the pilot, and that's when the really hard work comes in. So I get a little resentful if it's someone, sort of parachuting in for a big paycheck and then, getting airlifted out, when episode 2 needs to be done. But for those people who want to come in and they've had some success in feature work or done feature work and now say, I'm not getting to do the character stuff I want to do in the feature world. I'm not getting to tell those kinds of stories in TV. Sue or Josh will allow me to do that. I want to do that. I want to dig in and I want to learn how to do it. I say great.
Yeah, we love working with feature writers. Some you find out are built for TV and built for the speed of TV, and some you find out aren't. And usually by then, you're hosed.
Don't you think so much of it's personality? Don't you think it's like whether or not someone's used to being? It's a really collaborative medium, but it's a writer's medium. But you need to be able to hear input and work quickly and work with other people and be a great manager, because I think so much about it is getting the best out of the people that are working for you. Even if you need some help, kind of supplement, to sort of supplement your basic skill set. I always think of when I, as an agent, when I used to meet certain feature writers, I think that person would be great in TV because they're just more sort of porous. Like they're most used to listening to other people and writing quickly.
Yeah.
But I agree with what you're saying about people coming parachuting in, and I think one of the great things at HBO is that they wouldn't, there's a rule that you wouldn't buy. The person has to make a commitment to the show. And I think it's true because it is how it works. If it's living in the person's head, you can't just create a template and walk away. I just don't believe it's going to really work.
Brandon, you've done both screenplays and TV.
I parachuted and.
And you've. do you have a preference?
Between TV for sure.
Yeah.
Movies are wretched. I mean, even on the larger films. I remember a story. I was doing a movie for Paramount called Tomb Raider. And they flew me to England where they were prepping the film, and I had my bags on the hotel, and I got in the elevator, and the bellman said, and we were riding together in silence, and he turned to me and said, "So you're the new writer?" Oh. It was like, and I went to this room where I realized like 12 other writers.
The skeletons,
lived, it was disgusting. It was like Barton Fink, It was that to me encapsulates the whole screenwriting. Whereas in TV, you have a lot more control and respect and so forth. They're both fun. I'm really kidding, but
TV. Well, I think
I'm working right now with a woman who had sold a couple of features, very, very good writer, and that's where she's made her name, so to speak, so far in the business. And she and her husband had a great idea, which ABC and CBS were very interested in, and ABC got it. And the way it was arranged is my partner and I were paired with them because we have lots of experience making television shows, and this woman, terrific writer, but doesn't. And boy, oh boy, when the first set of notes started coming in from studio and network, her head was spinning. She'd never had to deal with so many notes thrown at her so quickly. And I said, listen, let's just, let's slow it. It's all going to be fine. We're here to make sure your script doesn't get irreparably damaged. Her first pass on the script made it a lot worse. But then we kept working through it. She wasn't used to writing so quickly. That's what it was. She just tried to address every note by hitting it on the nose, And so over the course of 10 days, we sort of were able to accomplish what the network and studio wanted, which were correct notes, and still keep the make the draft just as good as it had been when she first turned it in terms of readability. So, yeah. But what they'll do is they'll pair you with somebody who has experience.
I think we're past the time, so I thank everyone on the panel, everyone in the audience, everyone in the world.